So now it's time to start a discussion about Singleton. But first I'm going to copy this code, I'm going to copy this class with the companion object, and I'm going to paste it inside the classes file. And if you don't have this code because you create a new project, just type the code that I'm going to type in a second. So let's delete the code inside the main function. Now, what is a singleton? A singleton is a design pattern in Kotlin with which you want to have only one instance of a particular object. So you want to have only one instance of a particular object, and you want to have that instance available globally throughout your program. So you don't need to create an instance every time you need to use that object in a different part of your code. And there are practical reason for having only one instance of a class. Let's say that you have a database. You want to have only one instance of that database, which creates the database, which gets the data, and so on. Because if you have multiple instances, if you are able to create multiple objects with that class, then you will have multiple databases in your phone or on your PC, and that is not good because you're using more memory than you should, and you have duplicated and unnecessary code. So to solve that, what you need to do is to create only one instance of a particular class. And having this example in mind, this is what we're gonna do next. And first I'm gonna show you how we did in the past, how we created a singleton without having the object keyword. So you go down here, and first we're gonna create a singleton in the old way. So we type here class, we're gonna use our example database, not gonna create a real database, we're gonna just use this as an example. And to restrict the creation of instances with this database class, we need to make the constructor private. So we type private, and when you use an access modifier with the primary constructor, you need to use the constructor keyword. Otherwise you'll have an error. So if I delete the constructor keyword here, I have an error which says use constructor keyword after modifiers of primary constructors. So we put constructor, and inside the class, now because we cannot create instances of this class, that means that we cannot access any of the properties or the functions of this class. And to have access to a function which is gonna return an instance of this class, you need to use a companion object, because with companion objects you can have properties and functions being allowed to be accessed outside of the class without creating an instance. And here we type again the private access modifier. We call this instance, and it's going to be a database, a nullable database. Should be var there. Instance database, and as I said, nullable, so we can assign null to it. Then we define a function called getInstance, and this function is going to return an instance of our database class. Only one instance, only one single instance, not multiple instances. And to do that, first we check to see if the instance is null. So if this is the first time that we want to access this instance, then it's gonna return true. If not, it's gonna return false. So we check to see if it's equal to null. If it's equal to null, so our instance hasn't been initialized, you're gonna type instance equals to database. Alright, so if the instance is equal to null, that means that the instance has been initialized. We initialize the database. So we can initialize the class inside the class. We cannot initialize it outside. Else, so if this condition fails, the code below is going to be red. Else you're going to return the instance. So if the instance is not null and this code is not going to be this condition is going to be false and the code will not be executed inside the if, we're going to return the instance. But here you should return the database and it should be a nullable database. Alright, so our error disappeared. Let's delete this. Let's press Ctrl Alt L. Alright, now how we're gonna use this? First, we type here val instance, and we put equals, and we type database dot, and now I'm gonna use our function get instance. And if we print this instance in the console, so we type here instance. If you run this code, so now we're calling the fun gets instance inside the component object. We get this code. This code represents the location memory of the instance. So we have this code here. And if we try to instantiate this class, so we put here the constructor. If we do that, then we get an error because the constructor is private, so we cannot create an instance. And when we call the get instance function, so when we did this, it first checks to see if the instance was equal to null, and it was equal to null, then it created the instance and then it returned the instance. But if you call this function again, so let's call it instance2 equals database dot get instance. Now this will evaluate to false because the instance is not equal to null. We have an instance, and it's gonna come down here and it's gonna return the instance, the already created instance. So if I put a println here and I'm gonna output the instance2, you're gonna see that there is no instance2. You have the same instance because it's returning the already created instance. So we have the same code here, meaning this translates to that you have the same instance. So no matter how many times you use database like instance, if it's the first time, then it's gonna create the instance and it's gonna return the instance. If you call that again, like we do for instance2, then it's gonna return the already created instance. So in this way, you have the same instance no matter how many times you call the get instance function, because it will always return the same instance because of our logic that we created here. But there is a shorter way to achieve the same thing by using the object keyword, and this is what we're gonna do next. So let's close this. Now let's see how we can create a singleton, and which is gonna have the same behavior that we created here. So it's gonna be only one instance using the object keyword. So I'm gonna type down here object. I'm gonna call it database. Now let's delete this code because we cannot have two objects which have the same name. And we cannot have a constructor here because it's a singleton. So you put only curly braces. You can have properties and functions inside the singleton created with the object keyword. So let's delete that code inside the main function too. So now by just typing object database, now we have the same thing that we had previously, just by typing object and database. So this will always return the same instance, and we have only this code object and the name of the object. So the instance of the object is going to be created the first time you call it. And we can put an initializer block to have some code to be executed here. So let's put a println. Let's say database created. And to use this, just type, let's put a println and type database. And now if you run this, and the first time you call the singleton, that time the singleton is gonna be created. So we have database created, then we have this code which represents the string representation of the object. And if you press Ctrl D here, look what happens. we have database created. So because this is only one instance, this object is a singleton, it calls the initializer block only once when it initializes itself. So when we call the database for the first time, it's initialized and it calls the code inside the init block, and after that it outputs this string representation. The second time we call the database, we don't have database created because the instance was already created, and the initializer block is not called again because we have the same instance. So if you can press Ctrl D multiple times, and you're gonna see that we have the database created only once, because that is called only when the object is created for the first time. So on this line, in the next lines we have the same object. So we have here this is why I have the same code, because it's basically the same instance. So as you can see, this is a lot simpler and more concise than the code that we had previously. So this is how you can create a singleton in Kotlin. This is how we should do it. So see you in the next video.